lot of my friends around home are, you know, and my family is sort of, I don't know, combination between redneck and southern accent. We ain't got as much twang as some of the folks down here, but there's a little bit in there. Morning, friends. We're down south again. Me, Greg, and Hayden come down here to meet up with Dr. Chamberlain and the graduate students to talk about turkey research. Some of you may know we were down here last year and met up with Dr. Chamberlain and talked about the studies that they had going on in Georgia, and we've been trying to fund a project, actually multiple projects that they've been doing in Alabama. So we're gonna meet up with him and his team this morning and try to get the scoop. Might even go out and try to capture some birds, film them, tag a few of them, which would be really sweet. All good. Good, how are you doing? I'm Aaron. I'm Hayden. Just having, the Toms are the ones that are coming in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but we want
Right.
Yeah, this morning we have.
Good to see you again. How you doing?
You're doing good, Aaron.
Yeah. Turkey trapping, a little different than turkey hunting.
Yeah.
It's a lot of boredom. Incredible boredom, followed by minutes
I
of
don't
terror.
get bored.
They show up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun though.
Well, guys, we made it out here. Talked to the doc and Mr. Patrick this morning. And you said Paige is back there right now setting a trap. So we're gonna have a conversation here about turkey research, but we might get interrupted in the middle of it.
We hope we do. We hope we do. Yep, we've got a bait site back here that we've got a rocket net deployed on, and hopefully some birds will show while y'all are here, and we'll hear a boom.
That'd be pretty sweet.
But the boom won't be a shotgun, it'll be a rocket net going off.
That'll be pretty sweet. We came down just to visit with you all about, you know, the research. We obviously were down here last year talking with you about it. Then we got this funding going for the Alabama project. And you guys have been telling me about your your last week of mayhem over there.
It was.
Zipping around and trying to get all these song meters up. So I guess we just want the lowdown on it. What's going on with all that stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So, you know, last year you turned that fundraiser on and raised the money that we had said we needed to deploy the song meters across Alabama. And the idea was to purchase 30 song meters, to deploy 10 on each WMA, on 3 different WMAs, and stretch those from the north part of the state down to the southern part of the state so that we could capture kind of that latitudinal variation, and if there is any, in gobbling. They're called autonomous recording devices. We call them song meters. And inside of that box, there's batteries and there's an SD card. Then you've got this coaxial cable that goes up the tree, and up 30 feet up, you'll see an external antenna coming out. So every sound in the environment is on that SD card, whether it be a turkey or a cardinal or a crow. Then what we do is we take the data at the end of the season and we run it through, essentially, it's called a convolutional neural network. It's basically machine learning. You train it to identify what a gobble is. So we did that. Appreciate the people that donated money to that. It was overwhelming, and we appreciate it. I mean,
within a couple days, you guys helped us reach our goals. So we wanted to make sure whatever research we did help fund, we could come back around and do what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So we could show people where their money's going.
Yeah.
And it's been put to good use, it sounds like. So we're pretty stoked about that.
Yeah. So we purchased the initial 30 song meters using the monies that your followers donated. And then this kind of blew up into a really a broad collaborative project, which is honestly has been really refreshing. I had the U.S. Army at Fort Rucker contacted me about putting units there. The J.L. Betzel Foundation reached out to me, which owns property in southwest Alabama. We've also gotten funding from them to put 10 units on their properties. Additional partners came on the Auburn end, Turkeys for Tomorrow, the Alabama Wildlife Federation. Alabama NWTF has provided funding. The U.S. Forest Service has been cooperative with us. DCNR, their staff, their biologists are monitoring these units on the public lands. So it's really turned, it's gone from this kind of modest fundraising effort to this statewide study looking at gobbling activity and other aspects of turkey behavior. To me, it really speaks to the impact that you guys have and to the willingness of turkey hunters to put dollars towards research, and for the kind of the turkey hunting, turkey management community to come together and say, we're mutually interested in this resource, and we're willing to cooperate with each other and share information and share resources. And that to me has been the best part of this effort so far.
Yeah, that's what we're super excited about. Like we were talking about a while ago, is just seeing everybody kind of come together for a common goal.
Yeah.
I get questions about, well, what good is gobbling data? We know that turkeys gobble, of course. Gobbling data is actually a lot more important and impactful than I think most people realize. One, obviously, it's the primary determinant of hunter satisfaction. I mean, we know that. We want to hear birds. When we go hunting, we want to hear birds.
A lot of state surveys ask you that as a hunter. They're like, how many gobbles did you hear this day, or how much on average gobbling did you hear during this portion of the season, or whatever.
And research has clearly shown, Human Dimensions research has clearly shown that hearing birds gobble is what most influences our satisfaction. All things being equal, of course we all want to kill turkeys, but if we can go hear a bird, then we consider the hunt a success. The second thing, if you look at gobbling data, it closely tracks reproductive data. In other words, when you pair the gobbling data with nesting data on all of our study sites that we've worked on, you see this very clear trend where the gobbling tracks breeding, laying, incubation behaviors. So in the absence of those data, because we can't possibly collect nesting data across the entire state of Alabama, it's just cost prohibitive. The gobbling data provides you a proxy for some of those same pieces of information.
Sure.
The other thing that's really cool about the gobbling data now, because of the technology that we have, we're able to process the gobbling data, and Patrick can talk more about that, but we're able to process the data much quicker than we could, even a year ago. And that allows us to collect more and process it faster. It becomes a permanent archive, if you will. I mean, once we collect it, it's there. And as we continue to see technological advances, I think we're pretty certain we're going to be able to ultimately use the gobbling data as a proxy for abundance to determine here's approximately how many birds, plus or minus, are in this population. And that's something from a turkey management perspective has been lacking for decades. And in fact, if you go back and read the writings of the earliest turkey researchers, whether it's Henry Mosby on down the line, there was constant concern back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s about we don't know how many turkeys are out there, and we never have. Ultimately, being able to predict abundance at a broad scale is something that will change the turkey management world if we can get there. And gobbling data, we think, is going to ultimately be one way, not the way, but one way that we can get towards an abundance estimate.
Or at least give us a minimal,
a minimum number.
A number of what we think, a safe bet, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it'd be like we have 1.5 million detections, and 2,000 would be turkey gobbles. So sorting through that was a nightmare. But now we're getting to the point where we can do it at a fraction of the time.
Through just like artificial intelligence, machine learning?
The fancy name is convolutional neural network, but it's just machine learning.
I can't spell that.
We're going to have a spelling quiz at the end.
So all that does, and we talked about, I can pull this up on a computer and look at it, is it takes us the picture of what a gobble looks like on a spectrogram, and we cut it into a million pictures, and then I just we train the computer as to this is what a turkey gobble is, this is what it's not, and then it sorts it for us, and then we go back through and we check auditorily, we listen to them and make sure it is a gobble. And right now we range from like 30% to 60% accuracy depending on the other ambient sounds in the environment, and so it doesn't take us near the time.
You're out there last week with your climbing stand going up to the top of these things and hanging those things up.
Last week was crazy. We would pull up to a site. So we had coordinated with Alabama DCNR, obviously, because we were going to WMAs. Yeah. And thankfully, their staff kicked butt. They had picked out spots where we could go, you know, and efficiently and effectively. They would take us to the point. Here it is. Once they realized what our search image was, which was a pine tree that he could climb, their staff were awesome.
We initially started our conversation with 3 sites, right?
Yep.
3 public or WMAs, and now
It's 9.
It's 9.
Yeah.
And that's a mixture of public and private lands.
Yep.
Across the state.
Literally covering almost every habitat type in the state of Alabama.
And when you were talking a while ago, like midsummer is when you're gonna have a lot of this stuff accumulated and
We'll
looking
pull
at
them
it.
in July, and then it'll take Patrick, you know, a month or so, maybe a little more to crunch all the data through.
The state staff on these sites will hopefully be sending me data throughout the year, so I'll start processing it kind of monthly as it comes in, and then we'll have people start listening and verifying it, and then I would say probably with a couple months after. I don't want to short suit myself. We got a lot because we still have, you know, we've got the 50 sites here in Georgia, and we've got 30, I say sites, units, and then we got 30 in South Carolina that we're still running. So, but we've purchased some extra computers to kind of ramp up.
Actually, Alabama NWTF gave me funding just to buy computers to run this stuff, because it literally it's 24/7. It just chugs and plugs. I mean, this is terabytes of data.
Right. One thing I've learned, and you kind of know this because you talked to us last year, we were just laymen's coming into all this stuff. I mean, we knew it was important, but we didn't know all the details involved with research. And one thing that's kind of opened my eyes is just how much work it takes to do all this. And like how many people are out there trying to get this done. You've got students, you got techs that are out here working. Paige is sitting in the blind back there right now trying to catch turkeys. The more I'm around it, the more we want to help.
Yeah.
Like that's,
well, we appreciate the help, and I know every other researcher that's out there that's doing this work appreciates it too.
I mean, you guys are the professionals. You all know all this stuff like the back of your hand at this point, and I think you do a really good job at communicating it to the public in a way that we can understand. The machine learning with the GPS tracking and like being able to understand what behaviors.
Oh, it's amazing, the technology now that we didn't have until just recently, but we can, and I know the folks in Missouri talk to you about this. I mean, we can clearly see when a bird flies down.
Yep.
We can clearly see when they fly up using an accelerometer that's part of the GPS unit. You can see fine scale behaviors like when she gets up, an incubating hen gets up and shakes off. If she takes a nest, a recess from her nest, you can clearly see the trail, her activities as she's leaving the site. We're hoping, and this is knock on wood,
It's gonna work.
we're hoping we can also get to a point where we can see when an individual bird gobbles. And if we can do that, I'm gonna be optimistic. But if we can do that, that's when we can get towards that abundance estimate, because we will know the variation in individual probabilities of gobbling.
Yep.
And then when you pair that with the gobbling data, which are permanently archived, you stick those and you marry those together, and now you can figure out approximately how many birds are out there doing this calling. So you've got a measure of gobbling activity, and you've got a probability that an individual bird gobbles.
Sure.
Right.
Now you can start kind of getting a little closer to that. Well, how many birds did that represent?
Right.
How many birds are there and not gobbling that we're missing on the unit? That is, so when you go to count, those are the things you have to be careful of, and it's, without actually being there, you can't do that, these can't, but that knowing that probability allows us to predict, on average, what does it look like? And as Mike mentioned, the accelerometers in these units, we can actually see when they fly down too. And I think, we talked about this on the trip. This is going to help us with the abundance estimates too, because we can only use the gobbles first thing in the morning when they're on the limb, right? Because they're sitting in one location. If they're moving around on the ground, we can't tell from this. It doesn't give you a direction, right? Because it's just one unit, but what it gives you is like a power metric. So you can get an idea of how far an individual is away from the unit based on how strong the signal is. So if you only need to do that in the morning, then we need to get an actual, like, what time do they fly down every single morning? And we, as hunters, we have an idea of of when that is, but we have done no research to actually show us like, okay, we're with certain that this is the time that most individuals hit the ground, and then we can cut off our gobbling counts at that time to make sure that we're only getting birds on the limb. So yeah, the accelerometer stuff is going to be cool
stuff, man. I can't wait, because you know, as a turkey hunter, we've all encountered birds that didn't act right. He sat in a tree until 9 o'clock, you know, that kind of thing. I will be curious to see how these odd behaviors maybe aren't that odd. That maybe
they do that more frequently than...
That maybe there are some individuals that have certain behaviors that, you know, we encounter them and we think, man, that bird was really slick. Maybe he's like that all the time.
Right.
You know, maybe he's just predisposed to staying in the tree longer for whatever reason. I'll really be curious to see how variable that behavior is.
It's like we were saying the other day, maybe it's something in the environment that's doing that. Maybe he's got different strategies for different roost clusters. Like, you know.
Maybe, and at some point we'll be able to figure out, we don't see that toms go to the same roost site every night. You may have a bird that does, but most birds move around. But they do have very defined spots in their home range where they repeatedly will roost. So they may roost here for a day or two, go over here, come back over there. So they have these places that they feel comfortable roosting. And I'll just be curious to see whether the roost location dictates their strategy.
Right.
In other words, when I'm there, I fly down and I head east. And when I get over here, I fly down later and I go this direction. I mean, at some point we're going to be able to tease all of that out, and at some point is now. I mean, it's we're the technology that we're putting on these birds right now will allow us to do that. I've always looked at it from the standpoint, if what we do can't be used by managers, then it's really not of any value. And I'm not, you know, poo-pooing on just the science side of it, but there has to be a link between science and management. We're paid to provide information to the agency so that they can use that information to manage for the resource. I hope we will become better at being able to integrate the information into agency management. So ultimately, it's not just, hey, agencies, here's the information, here's the science, and here's what it says you should do. It's private landowner, I need you to be vested in this resource that you cherish. Now we're going to go implement that, you know, on the landscape. Private lands are going to be the key to that. In my travels, and last week it became stunning to me, as I drive around the Southeast and I look at what's around us, I realize that turkeys are living in suboptimal habitats in many cases. They're making it work because they're plastic enough, if you will, to do it. Our forests have too high a basal area. In other words, the density of trees is too high. There's too dense of a canopy. The understory needs management. There's a lack of fire. I see so many things as I drive around, and to Patrick's point, when we look at the percentage of a given study area that birds actually use when they have poults with them, it is single-digit percentages. I mean,
it's so specific.
So little of the landscape is what they think is brood habitat. If you look at where they nest, it's literally, they nest everywhere.
Shotgun blast.
Yeah, it's like a shotgun blast on a target. But when you start cherry picking, well, where did they brood? You shrink down to this tiny percentage on these forested landscapes that we work on. And it really speaks to me that we have a problem when it comes to brood habitat. And brood habitat is very specific because you've got a hen that's this tall and you've got a poult that starts out, you know, and is growing, and they're essentially scaling to mom. In other words, she can move as much as she wants and they have to move with her. So they have to scale up very quickly, and that's why they grow so fast.
Yeah.
So a brood's needs change dramatically from one week to the next as the birds are growing, and they can scale up to mom quicker. Well, if you look at where they take broods, it's very diverse. You know, it's these open areas, often disturbed areas, places where we have impacted the vegetation in some way. And when you look at the lack of impact, if you will, across the landscape, it speaks to me that we need to do better. I mean, and we need to, and the thing is, we have the information. We're getting the information. We have it. We just have to get it out there for people to see it and understand that, okay, what I'm doing is not enough, to your point. Okay, I didn't even realize.
I needed to hear that.
I didn't even know
those
I had
guys
these
to come to
problems.
the farm and be like, because I knew that we needed to do some things, but I needed them to come to the farm and be like, look, this is a plan. This is how you can execute it. These are the tools you can use. And at the end of that, I was like, wow, this doesn't take much at all. It's like, this takes a little bit of manpower, and all the tools that they use fit in the back of a pickup.
Yeah, I realize when I meet with people and talk with people that not always, but in general, many landowners don't realize that, one, what's good for deer is not good for turkeys in many situations. Two, turkeys require disturbance. They absolutely are, they're inextricably linked to disturbed habitats, whether it's fire, disking, timber harvest, thinning, whatever, you name it, but most doesn't. It's like, well, are they there? Yes. Are they sustaining themselves, as we've seen in many parts of the Southeast? No. They're declining. Are they going to be here in the same numbers a decade from now? Maybe. I want to see the reverse trend. You know, I want to see the landscape change at a broader scale, and I want to see us come out of these declines that we're seeing in many areas, and we can do that. It's just going to take a collective effort from landowners and turkey hunters, people that care about this bird.
Right. That's why this research is real cool.
And I think if landowners realize that it's not going to take, to your point, it's not going to take that much to get there, but it's going to take a little time. But if I'm willing to do this, could you convince your neighbor to do it?
Oh yeah.
And could you convince the next neighbor to do it? And if we could do that collectively, then we stand a chance at making an impact.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm fired up about that for sure. The last thing I was gonna say to everybody, we've been getting lots of questions on our end about the fundraising aspect that we've been talking about, and I kind of discussed that some earlier. That's something that we're gonna continue to do moving forward, and we'll have that page open on our website as those projects become available. But just be patient with us and watch our social media. You will see when that fundraising opportunity does open up, because we don't.
That's a net.
Oh, that was a net?
That was a net.
Oh, wow. Gotta go. Let's go.
We want to hop in here, Mike? Where do you want to go? How about this truck?
Here, how much batteries do you need? Go, huh?
Aaron's not worried about us one bit. He just wants to get back there as fast as possible.
There they are.
Here we go, honey. Come here, girl. Oh, pretty lady.
All right, you're good. Hugging over and get at it from over here.
Hey, Mama, you about ready? Good.
Good job.
Thanks.
What are the odds of that happening right at the end of the interview?
That was like perfect time. Like, oh, we're gonna wrap things up, and then I'm like, wait, that was a net.
Wrap us up on
Very helpful.
Well, we're at least started here. You want to get a chair page?
You want me to be daddy?
Yeah, we should be dating again.
All right, this girl is 14.
Yeah.
Terry, you want to hold this one while we work it up?
You know, the way turkeys molt too, they're going to use the same program, so we can compare across. And they're in a color sequence, so bands. You just use butt-in bands like these. She's about to collect blood. We put in these capillary tubes,
Yes.
and we'll use that blood to look at relatedness amongst the different birds. We can do disease testing.
Okay. All right.
Oh, that was beautiful.
We just need rest. All right. The keel score is going to be 1.5. 1.5. Yep. And then 17 point.
Release her?
Yeah. We'll release her them this way. Look. All right. Get her from down.
Got barring all the way to the end. This is an older girl. Basically what we're doing is they're putting color bands on, color leg bands, and we stack these bands in a sequence. So you've got one color on top and a different color on the bottom. And the reason we're doing that is we're using it as basically a mark recite. In other words, we don't have to have a transmitter on this bird. If we get a picture of the bird at some subsequent point in time, we know that one, she's still alive, and two, we can identify who she is. So you essentially do like camera surveys for deer, but we're doing them for turkeys, and instead of using antler characteristics to identify the bird, we're using the color bands to do that. And this is an adult hen. She's by far the biggest one out of this bunch, has barring all the way to the end of her primaries. And the reason we put the hoods on them is just to calm them down. They'll follow you with their eyes constantly. So if you hood them like that, they settle down, and because you want them as docile as possible in your lap to be able to do exactly what they're doing, move their wings around. So Paige is putting the transmitter on. Basically what that is, that cord is like parachute cord. It's got a rubber core on the inside of it. Eventually what will happen with that is that rubber breaks down and rots inside. And if the bird lives long enough, of course the transmitter would be dead by then, the batteries would be dead. But at some point it just falls off because the inner core of the tubing actually rots and just breaks apart. We try to put the transmitters on. You want to put them on just tight enough, but not too tight, so that the transmitter doesn't bounce a lot and doesn't move around a lot. But you also need it to move a little bit, if that makes sense. If you put it too tight, it's like when you put a backpack on, it weighs too much, or it's too tight, restricts your movement. We obviously want the backpack to fit right so that she's got free movement. So the birds that we've released, that you could see that were flying well, that's what you want to see when you release the bird.
Yeah, it usually doesn't really affect us at
You
all.
pick a single day in the trapping season and say, I'm going to be here, and we catch turkeys.
Yeah.
I mean,
Especially like in the first 3 hours you guys show up too. I was hoping it wasn't going to be an
it worked
all-day
out
sit
perfect.
for you.
It was wild.
He literally
Yeah.
said, well,
Wild.
I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and boom. And we went to scrambling. So many times I've had people show up, to get footage, and we never catch
Poor
birds.
Bark Woolley
We
last
never
year.
catch birds.
Didn't he sit for a whole week?
Oh man, he was here
Or
for
2
like
weeks,
2
wasn't he?
weeks.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah.
That was-
Mark.
Yeah.
We had a videographer with us last year, and he literally stayed here for a week,
Do you want me to hold the transmitter
and they
in
could
place?
not get birds to show up. And finally, they shot over a couple times, I think, and he texted me and he said, I just spent 77 hours
For 5 minutes.
for 5 minutes of footage. Like, no thanks.
5 hens here.
5 hens.
4 of them are adult hens.
Yep, 4 adults, 1 juvenile. So about 20%.
So do that math.
Yeah, and that's
Not good.
that's
Not
what we
good.
see across
That's
our
not good.
population.
Just
If you-
one bird getting put back.
Yeah,
Across 4 hens.
across 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, if 1 out of every 5 hens on the landscape is a juvenile, then these birds aren't replacing themselves
Right.
each year. The proof is right there in that net fire.
Yeah.
And that's what we see across our southern populations,
Consistent.
is mostly adults. And that's a problem,
Right.
without a doubt. And we're just not making enough birds. Yeah.
Program.
All right, you're up.
Now what Nick is going to do is remove a couple of feathers and tap into the brachial vein and just get a microcapillary tube full of blood. And what we're using that for is multifaceted. One, is we send it off to a lab that's collaborating with us, and they genotype it. So they basically tell us who this bird is, who it's related to in the population. We can look at relatedness amongst birds within flocks and across the population. We can also look at genetic diversity. What we're already seeing, which is really interesting, is that within some of these study sites, there are groups of birds that are not mingling genetically with other groups of birds that may be fairly close by, suggesting that there's something that's preventing birds from dispersing the way we think they should. What that means from a population perspective, we don't really know yet. The other thing we're doing is disease testing, so I'm collaborating with some folks here at SQUIDUS, the Wildlife Cooperative Disease Study, and they're taking the blood and doing disease and pathogen testing. So there's a lot of work done with literally one drop of blood. It's pretty amazing, and the disease stuff is not out of my lab, but it's super interesting because of some of the issues we've seen with disease popping up across some of our southern populations and elsewhere, actually. They are unwilling participants. That's what I've always said. The birds are unwilling participants.
Boy, it takes an army, doesn't it? It takes a lot of gear and
Yep.
a lot of hours.
And these people that are doing this, they're going to be the ones, I'm 50 years old. These are going to be the people that are making decisions. These are going to be people that are going to be working for the resource when I'm gone. And you can see how dedicated they are to what they're doing. And this is the most gratifying part of the research,
right?
Honestly, is the people that do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they work their tails off. And they're not, we pay them as much as we can pay them. They're working for the resource.
Right.
They cherish the resource.
We're all in it for the same reasons, all for those birds.
We got some work to do, but we're doing it. So there's a lot of agencies that are concerned about the bird, and they're dedicating resources, not just agencies, but nonprofits and other groups that are concerned about the bird. So they're dedicating resources to do the work.
Well, good job, guys. That's pretty cool. Thanks for letting us see that. That was awesome.
Timing couldn't have been better.
It couldn't have been better. All right, we'll get out of here and let the hens have their woods back.
Yeah. I'm sure they're ready for us to get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of taking a trek here across the southeast, filming different turkey research projects. Today we're gonna go to Alabama and meet up with Dr. Will Goolsby from Auburn, because they're doing a bunch more work over there, so we're gonna go get the scoop on that. Probably stop by Woodhaven on the way. Go by there and rattle Mike's cage a little bit, see what those boys are up to. Maybe get some turkey calls too while we're there.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's turkey.
Yeah.
Clucking per striker,
Yeah.
that longer one.
Yeah, we're making it easy. What you're trying to do is just let that thing gurgle. Just let it roll.
Got it.
I got it.
That should do it.
There you go.
Set now. Kill some turkeys.
Yeah, I remember when old Auburn beat Mizzou in the SEC championship game. And ever since then, it's just been nothing but sorrow. Got black bear in here, and caribou, and bison. Golly, that's huge.
It's kind of structured in two different halves. So early in the semester, I focus a lot on habitat management and techniques in habitat management. And then the latter half of the semester is all about population management. So it's a Tuesday, Thursday class, and usually on Tuesday, we're covering a concept in the classroom, and then Thursday, we're going out in the field and applying it in the lab.
Cool.
So
hit it right there at the
There you go. That was satisfying.
That one didn't. We're here at Auburn with Will Goolsby. We're talking more about turkeys and turkey research. He's already been informing us a little bit about what they have going on, but like we were just talking about here under the pavilion, the main reason we're here is because we're super excited about what this project in Alabama's turned into.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like I was telling you earlier, I really feel like that effort that you guys put forth, was it last spring? I think it was when you started that. Yeah. Really helped set a lot of things into motion. So I was already talking, there's a lot of interest in doing turkey research in Alabama. I was already talking to the Alabama Wildlife Federation, and their turkey committee was already saying, we're interested in doing some things, float some ideas to us, how we could get involved. And then this new group, Turkeys for Tomorrow, was also kind of coming to me saying the same thing. I remember, coincidentally, Mike Chamberlain called me and he said, hey, I just filmed a research episode with the THP guys. They're interested in putting some song meters out on public lands in Alabama. What have you got going? Who have you been talking to? And how could we maybe leverage this or use it as kind of a funding match opportunity to make it into something bigger? And ever since then, it's just continually evolved.
That's what we're most excited about, is because when we started this, like Mike was saying the other day, this started as a pretty modest deal. Mm-hmm. When, like I was just telling you, we wanted to start something small that we could track, right, that we could like come down and film. That way we show people where their dollars are going and all that stuff. Right. And then it blew up into this huge collaborative effort with, like you said, Alabama Wildlife Federation and TFT.
Yeah, it went from 3 study sites, basically like North, Central, and South Alabama, WMA. And now in each of those areas, with that additional funding brought in from AWF and TFT, we've got 3 private land sites that are paired in the same counties that those public lands are in, so that we can have a little bit of a opportunity to contrast what's going on like with gobbling activity on more intensively hunted public lands versus less intensively hunted private lands. And because they're, right there next to each other, that controls for a lot of potential, variation that we're not interested in. So yeah, I guess that takes us up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total properties that we're doing it on now. So a good mix of public and private, and from Southwest Alabama to Northeast Alabama.
I was gonna ask you where you guys are at. You got grad students right now that are setting nets, I'm assuming.
Yep. So kind of the outcome of all this is we've hired 2 graduate students, and we've got 3 research technicians working with those graduate students. And there's really a lot to manage, because we not only have the song meter stuff, which just got started last week. Right. So when Mike and his crew started rolling out those song meters on public lands, we started doing the same thing concurrently on private lands. Yeah. But we've got those guys working on that. We've got those guys working on capture. So our capture's underway. They're sitting nets, like you said, right now. And that's only taking place on, one site that we're studying very intensively, looking at, nest timing, nest success, nest predation, poult survival, and then, habitat factors that affect all of that. Right. And then we've also added in a couple other components. One is disease prevalence sampling throughout the state. And that is rolled into this other work that we're doing, where we're trying to collect several hundred hunter-harvested birds a year to look at fertility rates among jakes and toms. Probably going to be mostly toms. We don't get a lot of jakes harvested in Alabama, so that sample size may be kind of limited. But all those birds are going to be subject to disease testing as well, so we can start to get an understanding of what the prevalence rates are across the state and any trends in the distribution of some of these emerging diseases like LPDV. Okay. But what's really interesting about this disease, I don't know if you guys have discussed it much with Mike before. He knows, he's a wealth of information when it comes to it as well. But a lot of the birds that have it are asymptomatic. When they cast a wide net and sample a lot of birds, a lot of them have no outward signs of being sick. But it seems like from the limited data that we have so far, that as many as 50% of birds in a population have it, and that it seems to disproportionately affect hens. But the data across the entire southeastern region is kind of spotty. North Carolina did some pretty intensive statewide sampling of birds, and they found about a 50% prevalence rate. And that early data that we have across the entire region indicates that it might be somewhere around the same. but we really need more samples to get a robust estimate of what's going on.
Sure.
I mean, one thing that's really exciting to me right now, coming on board in this, Mike's been doing this stuff for probably if you go back to his graduate work, he's been doing it for a couple decades now. And really, all these other states are starting to see declines in their harvest, and it's kind of bringing like an all hands on deck approach. So we're at a point right now where there's more turkey research going on throughout the U.S. than probably there ever has been at any point in time. And to find a time period where there was anything even close to what's going on right now, you would have to go back to like the 80s.
Right.
When populations were still recovering and people were concerned about them. And then it was like, oh, those populations started growing at a rapid rate and people kind of backed off for a while. And I think, there's two things that have been really interesting throughout this whole process for me. It's like, one is, you've got social media for, it's a double-edged sword, right? A lot of people talk about the negatives associated with it. But I've seen, just since I got into wildlife research as a graduate student, 12, 15 years ago, it really has become this conduit with the hunting public that we never had before as wildlife researchers. It was our communication of the science that we were conducting to others was mainly done at these research conferences where we're mostly talking to other biologists and at state agencies and other universities, which is a good and a powerful thing because they're in charge of managing the resource. But this has given us an opportunity to bring hunters to the table too. And it seems like it's unique, and I guess the medium that we're using is, social media is a relatively novel thing, but if you think about it, I was just talking to another group about this yesterday. This is really a repeat of the story that has been going on since the early 1900s in the U.S. with the North American model of wildlife conservation, which is hunters and sportsmen being concerned about the resource and banding together to find ways to solve issues that are facing, game species.
Right.
So I think it's cool because it's got a new, it's got kind of a new spin on it, a new medium through which it's happening, but it's the same story that really has blessed us with the wildlife populations that we have today.
I'm sure when you're sitting in a conference with a lot of other fellow biologists or state agency folks or whatever, you're probably talking super high level stuff. You're using a lot of big words that I don't understand. But then when we sit down and we actually talk about this stuff, you guys can break it down in a way that your average hunting public can understand. And that helps guys like us rally around it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we didn't really have a conduit to talk to the hunting public before because, the only thing that we had was, we could go do a one-day workshop at an extension office in a county somewhere, and you may be lucky to get like 20, 30 guys from the local community to show up. And now, we can sit down and do one like Facebook Live interview or, some kind of Zoom conference or something like that and reach a lot more people.
Yeah. And now, just this winter, you're seeing all these people that are taking up trapping again, or they're thinking about ways that they can go trap predators on their property, or they're trying to figure out how to burn or manage their timber or whatever it is to improve the brood rearing habitat on their property. There's more people now that are like going to their state commission meetings and they're getting involved in this whole process because they're getting informed.
A lot of times, state agency biologists' hands are kind of, tied in their ability to do some of these things, but when they get backing from the public saying, we want more prescribed fire on this WMA, or we want more timber harvest to create nesting and brood rearing habitat, for example, or deer forage, they've got that public backing and that public support to move forward with that on. And I really think overall, because of the way that this information is disseminating to hunters now, we've got probably some of the most well-educated hunters in terms of wildlife population and habitat management that we ever have. I know going back to when I was young and first started hunting, comparing, what I knew then to what the average hunter knows now, it's night and day. And you'll find that, like talking to Mike too, he's told his story in podcasts and on interviews many times, but like him, I kind of found my way into this because of my passion for hunting and trying to learn more about managing habitat and managing sustainable populations for hunting. And a lot of the graduate students are the same way.
So you understand all sides of this?
Yeah, I would try to. I try to. I wouldn't say, perfectly, but, you guys had the same thing and you found your way into one sector of kind of the hunting, I don't want to call it an industry, but you know, everything that hunting entails, and we just went a little bit different path, you know. But it's cool to see how those two groups can now work together.
Right.
You know, and
move a positive direction.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Working towards a common goal.
That's right.